Hello, I'm Matt Hoss Comedy, and today we're talking about how not to do open mic comedy. I'm a stand-up comedian, I've got a master's degree in stand-up comedy, and I've been a broadcaster, comedian for many years, and I have seen my fair share of terrible open mic nights. Open mic nights are essential for developing the craft of stand-up comedy. It's really important to get to those nights so that we can grow, learn, get experience, and then we're able to go to those professional stand-up comedy clubs. But with open mic clubs, quite often there are things that do go wrong. You see acts who go a bit wild, there's venue choices which make it difficult, and there's general environmental reasons which make it quite bad. Environmental reasons meaning like certain things which are harder in the room, not like Greta Thunberg's there. Today we have a list of 14 things to do to help you improve at stand-up comedy in an open mic setting. These are rules which are really good for every level, but if you're a professional comedian and you're watching this, you probably won't get as much out as someone who's just starting out. But these are some tales I want to tell you to help you grow and learn in this time, because open mic comedy can be difficult, and what I'm doing here is I'm speaking out those unwritten rules that can help any young comedian and how to fast track some mistakes that I've made and ones I've seen happen in front of me. And I can tell you why it's bad as we talk about them. So today, just to clarify, we're not talking about what's wrong with the venue of choice. We're going to be talking about that in another future video where I talk about how to set up your stand-up comedy venue. Today we're looking at 14 things to not do when you're performing stand-up comedy at the open mic circuit. Number 1. This is the core, this is the theme, and this is pretty much goes throughout everything we're going to be talking about throughout this entire video. And that is, do not have an ego. It's pretty impossible to not have an ego when you do stand-up comedy, but you need to dial it back when you do open mic comedy. Be willing to make mistakes, be willing to learn new things and to grow and experience. If you have an ego, that's not going to happen. With an ego, you're likely to fall on your face pretty quickly and pretty hard, meaning that you won't come back from it as well. So it's important to have a bit of modesty, have that humble pie and eat it. And I'm going to explain more about what I mean by that, because that's quite a big thing. In stand-up comedy, it is, as I say, it's pretty hard to not have an ego when you do stand-up, because you're essentially saying, I am the funniest person in this room and I can make a whole bunch of strangers laugh. I think you've got to keep the confidence. Keep that confidence. And a little bit of ego is not too bad, but too much means that you're not going to get booked again. You'll get a bad reputation on the scene. It's important to not be too much, and it's hard to learn the levels of that, but have a very graceful entrance into comedy. And that grace and lack of ego is essentially the key to all of what I'm talking about today. But that leads me on to point number 2. Don't get belligerently drunk. And again, you need confidence. And being drunk, you might feel that's a good idea because you can, a little bit of Dutch courage. You hear that all the time, a little bit of Dutch courage. I can guarantee you, I've seen this so many times, never done it myself, but I've seen so many people when they do their first ever gig, they get so drunk. And I'll tell you what, it's never good. Never good. I've never seen it be enjoyable once. But what I have seen, I've seen a couple of people get away with it. But it was a bit close to the knuckle at times. But I have seen tons, thousands, hundreds, that's more realistic, hundreds of car crashes when people are drunk when they perform. And it's never pretty, you lose control, you're already quite nervous and it makes it more nervous, and you need that articulacy. That was quite ironic. You need to be articulate when you're doing stand-up. You need to have your wits about you. It's okay for the audience to be a little bit drunk because that means comedy can flow a bit more. But if you're drunk, you're losing control, and you need to focus on your material. You need to focus about doing it better. I think maybe a glass of wine or one or two drinks is fine. But I would say any more than that, then you're not going to grow from that experience. It's just going to be a horrible one. Don't get drunk. Don't get drunk at a gig, especially if it's one of your first time performing. It's way better just to try and take on those nerves face on. Number 3, this is the heart of it all. Don't be edgy. You see, a lot of people want to do open mic comedy for the first time. They're trying to be an edgy comedian. They're trying to say things controversial and trying to use shock humor as a way to deliver comedy, because that's the only thing that they know. What I mean by shock humor is using a type of comedy which is very brutal or controversial or rapidly dark as a way to get laughter. But the thing is, with shock comedy, you only get shocked once. So you may get one laugh as a shock comedy saying something atrocious. And also, side note, it probably isn't a full-on laugh. It's more like, oh god, that guy just said something pretty bad. And yeah, it's usually a guy. The thing is with that, you may get a reaction from that, and you may think that's kind of funny. But in stand-up comedy, that doesn't really work, because you do that once, people are like, you get a reaction. But if you continue to do that, the shock is gone. It's like, yeah, you lose the element of surprise, which was the only thing working for you. So to deploy that over 5 minutes, after doing it in your first 15 seconds, it's not going to be very practical, and you're just going to look like a bit of a dickhead, really. So don't be edgy. Edgy comedians never make it very far. And what happens is that the idea that people do this is that they think they're very funny with their friends. They say these kind of dark jokes in offhand comments, which works in front of friends, but making your friends laugh or making your colleagues laugh at work isn't the same as being a stand-up comedian, because you're not round the pub table with your mates. You are in front of an audience with lights and a microphone, in front of people who don't know you, who are probably paid to see you perform. So saying the worst shit possible to kind of get a reaction isn't the way to go forward. I genuinely would recommend try and write some jokes that you genuinely like, that things that you do enjoy, and you're probably going to get a lot more of that. Give a lot of yourself to it. And just to clarify, just as a final note, I'm not here to judge. I know that sounds kind of preachy, but I'm speaking from experience. I've done many gigs where I've said horrendous stuff just to get reaction, because I didn't know how comedy worked. So it's important to know that I'm not here to judge, I'm here to help. I don't want you to feel bad about not kind of getting it right. That's why we're here. We're here to help grow forward so that you can become the best comedian that you can be. Tip number 4, quick and easy one. Don't expect to be perfect. You're there to learn. Make sure that you're willing to do that. You're not going to smash every gig, and some gigs are going to be impossible to smash. Every gig can still be a learning experience. Even if it's the worst circumstances, you'll still learn something. But that moves on to tip number 5, which is don't forget to learn. I think you need to take an analytical approach. Film your sets, record every set you can, and watch it back. As I say, treat it a bit like a job. What bits worked? What bits got laughs? It's important for you to kind of have a look surgically and be like, okay, this worked, this doesn't work. How can I improve this bit? And you can do a lot of different things in that, and I'm not going to tell you how to suck eggs here, but figure out the bits that work, get rid of the bits that don't work, and move on from there. Feel free to try different styles and experiment. This is a good time to do it. But what I'm trying to say here is, even if you do the best gig in the world, if you don't learn anything from it, or you just think you're God's gift to comedy, then that's not a very healthy approach. Because again, it's ego. You'll hit down hard. Okay? So make sure to look at what you could do to improve and how you can get better, because that's what professionals do. If you're mindful about why people aren't laughing at your set, and you can do stuff to rectify that, whether it's delivery or changing a couple of words, that's a real fast track to success. One which I wish I took. Number 6, I can't really say it any more clearly than this, but don't insult the audience. You would wish I didn't have to say that, but it does. I have to, because I've seen people literally insult the audience. Again, either shock humor or defensiveness, or just couldn't remember any jokes. So don't insult the audience. Matt Hoss, during his first ever gig, please don't insult the audience. I think it's okay to have banter, but I think there's a line, and it's not worth trying to cross it early on. Tip number 7, and talking about crowd work, I would really recommend try to stick into your material early on. Don't do crowd work. You can do a little bit if you really, really wanted to, but I think what's for the best, focus on your 5 minutes of material, because crowd work's hard. It is a hard act to do, and if you do it wrong, it makes the gig really, really hard to recover from. And doing crowd work is different from doing material. So get comfortable with your material first, then move on to your crowd work. I think that's a helpful thing to learn because it's a good routine to get into. Crowd work can be really difficult to pull off because it requires a lot of confidence and experience. And when you first start out, you don't necessarily have that. Number 8, a really important one. Don't forget to structure your set. Don't just make it up on the fly. Make a list of what jokes you're going to tell and which order to fit the timeline, because you're given a set amount of time. In the UK, it's usually about 5 minutes when you first start out. In places like America or New York City, you can be like 1 or 2 minutes, which is really, really hard. But what I'm trying to say is that if you figure out what's your best joke, what's your second best joke, and accordingly put them in as your opener and your closing joke. You want to start as strong as you end. And if there's dips in the middle, fair enough. But I would recommend, I think it's different comedians have different approaches to should you end on your best joke or start with your best joke. And they both are valid. And I would say start and end strong, definitely. But if you had to choose, probably start strong because you want to get that faith in early on. If those people believe, oh, this person's funny, that will help you through the middle end and give you that thing. If you don't have that spark to begin with, it's really difficult to get going. If people don't believe that you're funny, they're gonna stop listening. Tip number 9, don't rush your set. Your heart will be pounding, you'll have a dry mouth, and you'll have so much going through your head. And quite often it's difficult to time yourself on stage, but make sure that you have something in your pocket to tell you when your time is up or when it's about to end. I have this watch here, and with this watch it vibrates on my wrist telling me when my time is nearly up, so that gets me to start wrapping up. We'll talk more about that in a second. It's important to not rush it, because if you're saying all your words as fast as possible, that isn't the performance. You know, I've seen people being so nervous that they just say everything and it loses its funny. What is a funny idea or sentiment or a routine loses its comedy in the delivery because you're too nervous and the adrenaline. What I really struggle with on stage is, and with broadcasting, is that I will have so much going in my head and the adrenaline's pumping in, and it's a very unconscious thing, but I'm talking so fast it makes me look nervous, but actually I'm absolutely fine. It's just my thoughts are firing pretty quickly. So in that moment, take a deep breath, refocus, and get those lines out with the right rhythm and hit them perfectly. And that leads us on to our next point. Tip number 10. Quite simply, don't go over your time limit. You're not doing yourself any favors if you do. Yeah, you might get a couple extra laughs, and it doesn't matter if the audience is loving it. You'll absolutely end up annoying that promoter if you do that. If you stick to your time, you're likely to be rebooked. Tip number 11, get good at 5 minutes before going to 10 minutes. It's an easy ambition to have, to go from, right, I've done 5 minutes, let's do 10 minutes. What I see quite regularly is people who are amazing at 5 minutes, terrible at 10, because people often take that jump up and they add a lot of filler in. But what you're meant to do is build it up slowly. Get really good at 5 and then go to 10. Because I did 10s and 15s. I did even a whole hour when I first started because I thought I could talk for that long. But it's not just about talking for that long. It's about doing a performance and having engaging ideas for that long. And that's really difficult to do. So focus small and then make it bigger. Perfect your 5 and then move on to another 5. Number 12, don't forget what the comedic point is. When you're writing or creating a joke or doing some ad-libbing on the stage, don't forget, what is the comedic point of this? Because if you're making a point on stage and you're just saying words, or you're trying to be abstract or making a joke which it's not landing, just try to think, what is the comedic point of what I'm trying to say? What's the point you're trying to make? What is that thing that makes it funny? What's the thing that's making you laugh there? Is it the observation? Is it the twist in logic, the incongruent nature of the joke, the surreal aspect of it? Is it the performance gestures? It's a bit of a high idea, and we might tackle this in another episode, but I want you to think, what is the thing I'm trying to say here with my joke? And that question alone is a really effective filter to half of my material. When I'm writing something, I'll be like, wait, I tell a weird story, but there's no point to the story, there's no twist, there's no structure to that. And I'm like, what's the point here? Is it a weird story, or is it a piece of stand-up? That being said, don't be afraid to experiment, give it a go on stage, but if it ain't working, it ain't working. Throw it to bed. Penultimate point 13. Learn how to use your microphone. This is called mic technique, and what it is, it's holding a microphone. Pretend I got a microphone here. It's about holding the microphone close enough away from your mouth that you can be heard, that you're not overblowing the speakers, you're not screaming into it, because that's a really unpleasant thing for an audience. Not unpleasant, but definitely just annoying is also having no microphone for your audience as well. It can be super, super annoying if you can't hear anything, if you have the microphone all the way down below or too close. So learn that. You'll be able to hear the monitors usually in their place. You can probably get a nice gauge of how loud it is, and drop the mic or move it closer accordingly, or increase your own volume. But what I would say is learn how to use your microphone properly. Also, learn how to use the stand, because there's a lot of knobs on there, a lot of things that can move up and down, and you don't want to learn on stage because it looks really awkward. Have a go beforehand, or buy one yourself and learn how it operates. There's usually a mechanism where it's basically a lot of things you loosen and tighten to make it go up and down, or in and out. And our final point, tip number 14, a fundamental in open mic comedy and what not to do is don't leave the gig early if possible. If you've got trains or public transport, then sure. But what I'm trying to convey here is try not to leave early. Get there early, don't leave early. Think of it like this. If you just turn up for your set only, perform, then leave, that will not go down too well with the other comedians. And watching other performers perform is good to get to know how to improve. You get to see how other people perform. It opens your mind up a bit, and comedy's a social thing. You get to meet other comedians, get to network. You might get other gigs from it, for example. But you definitely will lose out on those opportunities by leaving early on. I know I leave gigs quite early, but that's because of other commitments or other things. But in those early days, I'd make sure to chat to the acts, communicate, create that network, and don't feel like you have to make friends at every gig, but say what things you like, chat to people. And if you're leaving early and you're only focused about yourself, again, ego, if you're like, I'm better than these peons, let's go, then that's not going to go down too well. Those are my 14 points today. And hopefully you have got some ideas about how not to do open mic comedy now. But we'd love to hear from you. Have you got any open mic stories of yourself? In future episodes, we'd love to review your open mic gig. If you've got 5 minutes and you want me to have a look over it, and you're happy for me to show it on the YouTube channel, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And it's not going to be a totally judgmental thing. It's there to help, but not to destroy you. We're here to help construct your set properly. So, hey, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe this video, share it with your friends, and if you know a local comedy collective, might you share it with them as well? I think it might be really, really helpful. I'm Matt House Comedy, and this has been How Not to Do Open Mic Comedy. Thank you very much.